The Adventures of Batman with Robin, Boy Wonder. Batman and Robin, dynamic duo against crime and corruption, whose real identities as millionaire philanthropist Bruce Wayne and his young ward Dick Grayson are known only to Alfred, the faithful butler. Ever alert, they respond swiftly to a signal from the police, and moments later, from the secret Batcave deep beneath Wayne Manor, they roar out to protect life, limb, and property as Batman and Robin, Cape Crime Fighters. Batman and Robin, scourge of Gotham City's kooky criminals. The Joker, clown prince of crime. The Penguin, pudgy purveyor of perfidy. And the cool, cruel Mr. Freeze. Watch out, villains. Here come Batman and Robin.
Welcome back, citizens, to an all-new episode of the Batcave podcast. It's your old bat chum, John S. Drew here, and I can't say we're continuing our journey through the Filmation 1968 series. I'm saying we're concluding it with this episode. And joining me, as he has from the very beginning, is the man himself from 13thdimension.com, Mr. Dan Greenfield. Hey, Dan.
Hey, John.
Concluding.
I know. This has been fun. This has really, really been great. And I don't know, it's funny, we haven't even really talked about whether we're going to do a recap of an overall look at the series or anything like that. And maybe, we'll do some of that here for sure. But I got to tell you, this was a blast. I mean, we've been doing it now. I mean, I think we started in 2017.
We did.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been at this for like a year and a half that we've done, because we've had some gaps because real life gets in the way. You've got other projects and I've got other projects, so it's been a long time coming for us to actually get to these last two episodes. But man, has it been fun! And I actually have enjoyed it a lot more than I expected that I was going to. I mean, I knew I was going to like it, but I've liked it even more. And these last two episodes that we're talking about, this series went out on a high note. I don't know if they knew that they were wrapping it up or whether they thought they were going to do another season and whatever, but everything hit their marks in both of these episodes, the two-parter and the one-parter.
It's funny because I liked this series before we reviewed it. I mean, I liked it. I liked watching it, but it wasn't something I would say, let me go out of my way to watch it.
Right.
But in talking about it with you, in making the connections with Batman 66, I've come to love it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it really is the de facto fourth season of the show, and that really, really comes through. And what I really see for me, and taking it all the way back to the beginning, and I know that this has been a theme that we've discussed throughout, is that I had very, very fond memories of watching these shows. When I was a kid in kindergarten, it wasn't all-day kindergarten. You had AM kids and PM kids.
Yes.
And I was an AM kid, so I was home. Not home, but dismissal was like at 12 or 11:30 at 12 or whatever it was. And my mom had just gone back to work. So, my parents were working, my sister was in school, and there was a woman who my mom hired who would take care of us after school. And her name was Marilyn Tagliaferri. And she had a son named Philip Tagliaferri, who went on to become a comedian. Your listeners may be familiar with the name. And, she had a couple of daughters, and they were all our age. And so Marilyn used to pick me up at school, and I'd go back to her house and watch TV. Basically, I didn't have homework. I was in kindergarten. So she, as people did back in the 70s, you plop the kid in front of the TV, and the kid's happy as hell, having a grilled cheese or a peanut butter and jelly, and she's off, doing errands around the house, and I'm just, left to my own devices having a good time. And these superhero cartoons were a mainstay of that. And like I said, so I was in kindergarten. So what am I, 5 or 6 years old?
Right.
And those are some of my earliest Batman memories, were watching Filmation Batman, because I didn't watch them on Saturday mornings. I watched them after school on Channel 5 in New York. I lived in New Jersey. And I seem to remember sometimes watching them by myself and sometimes watching them with Philip, or maybe my sister would be around. And so I'm not quite sure what time they were on. Maybe it was at the same time for them to be home from school. Maybe it wasn't. I know I'm getting a little bit off point here. But the point being is that when I think of watching these shows, I think of being like a little kid, a young kid. So I've always had this fondness, this real nostalgic look. But at the same time, I didn't remember, other than a few exceptions, didn't really remember episode to episode. So in watching these episodes, all 17, it's not 17 episodes, but 17 selections of 17 groups of episodes. It's been wonderful to go through each one and really look at how it developed and how the producers were approaching these shows. And just getting to this final one was really, they hit their marks. They went out on a big high.
They did. Absolutely. And I love it because what they did was they managed to work in almost every element of this show that we liked in these 2 episodes.
Yep. Why don't you give them the titles, and let's start recapping the first one.
Okay, let's start. We're going to be dealing with It Takes Two to Make a Team and Opera Buffa, or Buffa.
Right.
But the first one we're going to do is It Takes Two to Make a Team, which is the 2-parter written by Dennis Marks. Now, according to the Wikipedia, this final episode aired January 1st, 1969. Again, take it all with a grain of salt because things did change. And as I've been discovering, going through newspapers.com and doing some research on Batman and $6 Million Man and Shazam and Super Friends for all my various podcasts, not every show necessarily aired on the same time or day around the country. I found an interesting piece the other day on Batman where basically these 2 women, or not women, but girls, were telling how they watched Batman twice in one night because of the way their affiliates, some of them had older episodes that they were showing for the first time, and then they also saw the new one. So they'd watch the new one, and then they'd change the channel and watch the old one.
There are all sorts of weird things that they used to see much more of that in television back in the day than you do now. Now, of course, it's crazier now with all streaming and, how shows are uploaded and when they're shown for, on apps versus shown on, now it's so much more complicated. But back then it was kind of complicated too, because you did know that the network may be running it, but a local affiliate might be doing something else instead. And the affiliates had a lot of power to kind of change things up. And different markets who were uncomfortable with certain kinds of programming would change things. And you do still hear stories about that, but it does feel like it was more pronounced back in those days. So, as we've discussed throughout all of this, is that the way that these episodes are grouped, whether it's grouped on disc or grouped on, if you look at them on iTunes or grouped in streaming, is not necessarily how they were grouped when they were actually shown. And at the same time, we've had problems trying to locate a kind of a bulletproof list of air dates.
Right.
Because the stuff that you find online, whether it's Wikipedia or other resources, are also contradictory. So we kind of just throw these 2 out there saying that, we believe that these were the last 2 that aired together, but we're not entirely sure that that's the case.
That's right.
Nevertheless, it would seem that these were produced later in the run, and so therefore they definitely seem to have the hallmarks of that, because some of those earlier episodes that we watched, it did take them a little while to get their bearings, but by the end, they really did seem to have a handle on how they were approaching these cartoons, and these last 2 episodes really do convey that.
Yeah, no, they do. They flow, for one thing. I mean, this story moves. It's written by Dennis Marks.
Yeah,
so
who's written some of the best stories of the series.
Yes, exactly. Now, the opening itself, very fluid. I mean, we get our 3 main villains.
A South American luxury liner pulls into Gotham Harbor. In its safe, a treasure map for the buried fortune of the Peruvian Incas. Irresistible bait for the Joker, clown prince of crime. No safe is safe when I'm around.
Except this one, Joker.
Batman?
Going somewhere?
Gesundheit! Boy Wonder! A week later, the same Peruvian treasure map is en route to a bank vault. When the pudgy purveyor of perfidy, the Penguin, attempts to purloin it.
The treasure map is mine. Ah! The darn dynamic duo. Ah! Unfair! Unfair!
Days later, in the darkened bank vault, which contains the treasure map, a third attempt is made by the Riddler.
Batgirl, how did you?
You're no puzzle for me, Riddler.
When is a pineapple not a pineapple?
when it's a grenade.
One out.
Double play.
Ow! Wow, look at that.
He got away.
But that's all he got.
I thought it was interesting because the whole idea of this story is to show Robin isn't necessary and sort of make the team doubt themselves and such. And I thought the whole thing with Joker gassing Robin, like it would have been a theme throughout all three heist attempts, but it wasn't.
Right. What I like about the episode, and I noticed this right off the bat, is that it goes right in, and we've talked about this before as a theme, is that it uses the benefits of the format to its advantage, and the fact that you could, and we've seen this throughout the series, but it really comes home here, is that you didn't have to worry about casting. You didn't have to worry about whether Cesar Romero, Burgess Meredith, and Frank Gorshin were available to be able to film a team-up episode. You could write this because you had the same actors who were doing the voices all the time. So, but having Ted Knight, he can do 3 different voices, and so it's just a matter of what the writers want to write. And they really do use that advantage of being able to bring in these three villains, plus having Batman, Robin, and Batgirl all together. So you get this sense that this is almost like a valedictory. Now we've seen these big team ups before with the villains, but it did hit home for me once again that this was the advantage of doing these kinds of stories in animation. The same would have been true for comics too, but they didn't really do many comic book team ups with villains. In animation, it really seems to work, and it's very exciting the way that they pulled off these opening sequences and how it leads into the rest of the episode.
Now that's something funny you point out. You say Ted Knight doing all the voices, and Dan and I are doing another podcast on the Super Friends, which I'll talk about at the end of the show here. But we were just commenting on a recent episode about how when the main cast does other voices, it doesn't always work. And here's Ted Knight, who flawlessly jumps between Joker, Penguin, and Riddler, and unless you're really making an effort, you wouldn't know it was always him.
Yeah, and of course that also points us to the great Larry Storch versus Ted Knight doing the Joker in Filmation 1968 thing, where people are like, oh, Larry Storch did the Joker, and as we subsequently found out ourselves, that Larry Storch did not do the Joker in Filmation 68. It was Ted Knight. And when you listen to Filmation 68 Joker versus, say, the Joker on Scooby-Doo, it's a different voice. And it's true, it's Ted Knight, but at the same time, you listen to the Joker, and he does not really sound like Ted Knight. And the same thing really with a Penguin, too. I think the Riddler sounds more like Ted Knight than or you can hear more of Ted Knight in the Riddler than you can in the other voices. But he does make them distinct enough so that they sound like different characters. And that really works well.
You know why I think there is so much confusion with Storch and Knight and who did what? Because I've been seeing more and more of it lately, especially on Twitter. People will post a picture of the Joker from Scooby-Doo and go, wow, the Filmation Joker was really cool. Right. And I'm like, no, that's not film. Because they do look alike in the face, but the costuming is different. If you do the full length and look, you can see there's a clear difference between the two Jokers. And I think that's maybe where people are getting some of the confusion from.
I think that's part of it. It's also the hair. It really is hammered home at other points in this episode and in the one part we're going to talk about here, is that the Filmation characters were very much close to model for what you were seeing in the comics at the time. They were using that Carmine Infantino house style. And the Joker, as he's drawn in Filmation, really looks like how the Joker was being drawn in the comic books at the time. Hanna-Barbera, less so. Even down to, it's really about the hair, too. You see that it's not just the hairstyle, but it's the way the hair is colored, is that he's colored mostly black with green highlights, as opposed to being drawn all green. And on Hanna-Barbera, his head of hair is kind of like this flat, just overall green hair color, as opposed to here, they give it some texture by drawing in the black and the greens as a contrast. And it looks more like the Carmine Infantino design than the Hanna-Barbera design does. So that's one way to also take a quick difference, is if his hair is all green, chances are it's from Hanna-Barbera. And if it's got those black and green contrasts, then it's Filmation.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Also the coloring around the eyes. I don't think that the Hanna-Barbera Joker had the blue around the eyes, whereas Filmation he does.
And that's interesting. I should do screen grabs of the two of them, put them side by side. Because I was just going with the costume. I didn't even, because I always just say, oh, they're both.
The faces are definitely different. The penguins look a little bit more similar, but if you put them side by side, there's a definite difference.
Wow. Okay. All right. So we cut to the three villains after we get our title sequence there. The three villains meeting and determining if they can break up the trio.
Blast those Cape Crusaders! We got to stop them, or we'll never get to the Peruvian treasure.
We must break them up, or something.
That's it. Split them up. Destroy their teamwork. Throw off their timing.
Nah, even if we split up the duo, there'd be Batgirl.
Batgirl, of course. We'll make Robin jealous of Batgirl. So jealous.
The duo will be no more. No teamwork.
And without teamwork, we can take care of them. Easy.
And grabbing the treasure map will be a cinch.
So they plan a jewelry robbery in which Penguin triggers the alarm to get Batman to come in. And it's this whole thing where Batman says, you two wait out here after they've caught a couple of the goons while he goes to check inside. And then there's a fight outside where basically the goons kind of allow Batgirl to take them down, whereas they easily overwhelm Robin. And it's interesting because now, for the first time, this isn't just Batgirl throwing things or jumping and they fall into the wall. She body checks two of them.
Well, this is what I was, we again, because we're recording the episodes around the same time we're doing also our Super Friends podcast, and I watched these at the same evening that I watched a Super Friends episode, and the distinction between Filmation and Super Friends in terms of the violence. And this is mild violence, all things considered, but still, compared to Super Friends, this is a lot more violent. And Batgirl does some serious ass kicking in this scene, where it is for her an extended fight, even more so than what you would see her do on Batman 66. Where, famously, Yvonne Craig was prevented from throwing a punch. They considered that to be unladylike. I think it was Dozier who didn't like it. So she was always kicking. And, of course, it looked great because she was a dancer. So every time she kicked someone, it always looked terrific because she was able to do those high kicks. But a lot of what she did were like judo moves and throwing things or maybe hitting somebody with a board or a vase or something like that. But here she's actually hand-to-hand combat. And it looks really cool that she's able to do it. And then she does. She body checks the guy. And what I like about all of this is that overall, this episode specifically really feels like a Silver Age Batman comic book story. It's got those campy elements from the TV show, but it really feels like a late 60s Batman comic, because this is the kind of thing that they would do. That, giving Robin a crisis of confidence and trying to set up a conflict between Batgirl and Robin and kind of, trying to break up rather than just murder them, let's try to break them up and that will make them less effective. So it's just like this high concept idea that is very fitting for the way Batman and Robin stories were being told at the time. So I just think that's a terrific way of executing it.
It is. I agree. I liked also then it's like the fact that considering, like you said, Dozier wouldn't let him. Here we come to the very end, and you mentioned at the top of the show, you wondered if they knew the writing was on the wall, that they were like, what the heck? Let Batgirl actually get some physical violence in.
Yeah, I have no idea how, that's part of the problem with going over these episodes. And the same holds true for Super Friends, is that there's not a lot of documentation out there for what was going on behind the scenes. Still, the best book I have found about Filmation was the one that came out from Tomorrow's some years ago. That was Lou Scheimer's autobiography that Andy Mangels basically put together. And it's great. It's a really, really good book about Filmation and its history and the production of all of their different shows. But that's exactly the problem, is that they only spend so much time on Filmation Batman, so you get little bits and pieces. But the book covers Scheimer's entire career and Filmation's entire run, so it's only a small part of the puzzle. But there's not really a lot out there about storytelling choices and why they decided to do what they do. Because, again, there's a real assembly line feel to the way these shows were produced. And you did get to feel, I don't want to say sweatshop because of its implications, but it's that idea that, here's a bunch of, and I say guys because for the most part, it was men who were putting these together. Although notably there were women animators and women, involved in the production at Filmation, and also with, I think, with Super Friends too. But it was male dominated, and certainly it was all men writing these stories. So you get the sense of, exactly what was their approach to these, and how were they looking at these stories? Because we know, for example, in comic books, who the various writers were and how they approached their work, and it's all pretty well documented. There's a lot, particularly if you're talking about what was going on in Marvel at this time. There's virtually no stone left unturned, but with animation, we're left to guess.
I have to get a quick plug in here because you mentioned female animators and such. I recently did another Batcave episode here with Robert Long where we looked at the wild world of Batwoman. Right. And the woman who played Batwoman, I forget her name now, but she was an animator for Hanna-Barbera as her day job. And then she took these acting gigs, especially this one she did not care for, but she took it because she hated the director, but she did it anyway. But she was an animator. So if you get a chance, take a listen. It was a lot of fun, called The Wild World of Batwoman. Hopefully we did it as much justice talking about it as Mystery Science Theater 3000 did in riffing on it.
That's great.
Yeah. So, okay, Batgirl takes out the goons. Robin now is like, let me go see what's going on with Batman, even though Batman told them stay outside. So they set things up that Batman's going to be jumped by one of the goons. Robin tries to warn him, but gets tripped. And Batgirl comes in and saves the day because one of the goons outside, and this was weird. I thought, why is she listening to this guy? He warns her that Batman's falling into a trap.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But still, she's the one who comes out on top. She manages to do everything right. So, of course, and I did think this was a little rough.
Look this way, Batgirl! Another one? One more, Batgirl!
Wait!
Hold it again, please!
It's working! Our plot is working beautifully!
And it's angled in such a way you keep thinking that one of them's going to pull back and show Robin eventually in the picture. But no, he's in the background getting pushed away by other photographers.
Yeah, and he just has to slink off, just all dejected. This is also great because this is, again, a real tonal shift from what, of course, certainly what comics are like today. But even so, what you would see, gradually start to happen throughout the 70s. Here, it's the late 60s. Batman is still celebrity Batman. Mm-hmm. And you see this in the single part or two, is that this idea that he's not just this, he's not a shadowy avenger of the night. He's just this really well-known crime. It's like it always makes me laugh, just as a side note here, in watching old James Bond movies, and as that series progressed, James Bond becomes increasingly more famous. Mm-hmm. It's like he's the most recognizable secret agent in the world because everybody seems to know who he is. Of course, it's absurd. Nobody should know who he is. But it's the same thing with Batman, is that the idea is that Batman actually has his picture taken for the newspaper, and he gives press conferences, and he's this man about town who wears a costume and beats up bad guys and helps the police. And this really kind of puts that to the fore. And you used to see that, of course, on Batman 66 all the time. And that was part of the gag, was the idea that Batman would have press conferences. But that's what was going on in the comic books. That was what Batman was presented. Superman, it was the same way. But it was like this totally approachable character as opposed to what we've, the way he was originally conceived and certainly the way he's presented now. So, yeah, this idea that Robin gets elbowed out of the press conference and he wanders off all sad. And it's just one of those things that I thought, this is very, very Silver Age. This is really very much of its time. And it's so charming because of it.
And it's funny because you say, he's the Silver Age. I don't know how much of this is Silver Age or how much of this is just Filmation not wanting to spend the money. They get this scene then of Dick riding his bike down a road, but he's in his suit.
Yes, yeah. It's funny. Now, the other thing, what I also really, really like, and again, we've talked about the matte paintings on Filmation and how striking some of them are.
Yes.
When he passes the billboard,
yes,
that says Gotham City, home to Batgirl, Batman and Batgirl. That's a great image.
yes,
And the Batgirl is drawn more like the Filmation Batgirl, but Batman's face is lifted from what's one of the. It's lifted from the comics,
right.
and it's one of those. His head is one of the stock images that they used to use for marketing, and I'm not sure whether it was drawn by Murphy Anderson or whether it was Carmine Infantino, inked by Murphy Anderson, but it's gorgeous. And I thought to myself, what a great! And I said to myself, tell John to make sure he grabs this frame grab when he puts his show notes together.
Okay.
Because it's a great shot of that billboard and the illustration, and again, a reminder that these people who put these cartoons together had talent, but the circumstances, under which they had to produce these cartoons were less than ideal. So there was a lot of cost cutting, and so you don't necessarily get the sense. You think of these as schlocky and a lot of times off model, but at the same time you were dealing with professional writers and artists who really did know what they really knew what they were doing.
Right. Now let me ask you this, though. Detective Comics, 1968, had they made the move yet now into 69, had they made the move yet to Detective being Batman and Batgirl? Because I know there was a brief time there. She was the featured, person teamed up. It wasn't Batman and Robin.
Right. It was right around this time. And it wasn't those weren't team-ups. What they were when you'd see those, it was right around late 60s, 68, 69, 70, where they did start to make that transition. When you would see on the cover, it would say Detective Comics, and it would say Batman and Robin, Batman and Batgirl. But that's because those were the backup stories. They weren't team-up stories. So if you saw Batman and Batgirl, it was because Batgirl was the backup story and Batman was the main story. So usually it was like Batman itself had Robin as the backup, and Batgirl was in Detective Comics. But they would switch that up also. But that's what that generally meant.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe there was some way that they were telegraphing the whole thing there.
No. And it's interesting, too, because this was the period also in the comics where, and it's funny because I just wrote about this at 13th Dimension. I did a piece about Irv Novick and the transitional period between the end of the show and the beginning, really, of the Bronze Age, when things were darker and, Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil brought that kind of gothic feeling back to Batman. Robin was shipped off to college. This stuff, this animation, the Filmation stuff, and the comics at the time were in that middle period. They were kind of in that crossover where things still had some of the campy, brighter elements, but they also were introducing ideas that Batman was more frequently seen at night as opposed to during the daytime. And a lot of that goes back to what Neil Adams was doing in Brave and the Bold at the time. That's really where it began. As a quick side note, for your listeners who may or may not be aware, but what we're seeing now in Filmation really kind of tracks what was going on in the comic books at the time. Because what you had was this transitional period between the campy TV show and what was going on later in the Bronze Age, where things were darker and things were getting more adult, where you sort of had elements of camp, but you also had somewhat straightforward storytelling, and you also had things taking place at night more than during the daytime. And it reflects what was going on in the comics at the time, with where Neil Adams in Brave and the Bold was starting to draw, it was his insistence that all the Batman stories, which were written by Bob Haney, were taking place at night as opposed to during the daytime. And so that was a real subtle shift where things were starting to take Batman back to his roots as opposed to what you were seeing in the campy TV show. In the comics, that transition was starting to take place, and the cartoons really kind of reflected that as well.
It's interesting, too, because it sort of all ties in with this whole thing of, where is Batman? I mean, because people always make this argument of what Batman really is, and I always go back to what Jim Beard said. Batman is a man who's trying to make up for what happened to his parents, whether that's done in a humorous way, whether it's done in the darkest of violent ways, or whether it's somewhere in between. As long as you've got Bruce Wayne, his parents murdered, he puts on a costume, he's Batman. It shouldn't matter. Now, you may say some things work better than others. I personally don't care for Like, for instance, I don't care for the Christopher Nolan movies. I'm sorry. I say it every time. I don't care for them. I think they just go too far. I think they're a little boring. And I think they're a little too, trying to be on the nose about what Batman should really be. And it bothers me, whereas, I, of course, love my 66 Batman. I love the Michael Keaton films. I can't say as much for the later ones, but...
Right.
And I liked Ben Affleck as Batman. I don't think he was that bad as others like to portray him.
Well, we could get into a whole other discussion about all of this, but the one thing I would say is that the one thing that's clear about Batman over 80 years is how adaptable he is to his circumstances, and that he works on so many levels. And as we saw, like a lot of the mid 50s to early 60s silly stuff has been reclaimed also. Grant Morrison showed the value in a lot of that in the comics, and certainly the TV show Batman Brave and the Bold showed the value of a lot of that stuff as well, in how that is as a credible a version of Batman as any other Batman. And so one of the things about Filmation also is that it shows that Batman works in different environments, and that's part of the reason why these cartoons work too, is that it's not the Dark Knight stuff, and it's not wholly campy. It's that middle ground that really can be the sweet spot if done well, and that's also what you were seeing in the comics at the time.
Right. Now, getting back to the story here, again, I'm laughing at Dick riding a bike in the suit, and then I'm laughing at the fact that we have to also show the media. First, he's listening to the radio, and they're talking about the new Batman and Batgirl song that the DJ promises to play later, but he's doing it all under... duress, because the villains are there holding him, to it. And I'm thinking to myself, later on, someone's going to be asking what happened to that Batman song.
Yeah. And also that they want to have Batgirl on Ed Sullivan, right?
Ed Sullivan.
Yeah, Ed Sullivan, which they just name drop.
Right. But I liked that also because usually whenever a pop culture reference was being done, it was more humorous than, hey, just straightforward, Ed Sullivan's going to have... I remember there was a Spider-Man from the 80s syndicated one, not the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, where he went on the Johnny Carson show, but it wasn't Johnny Carson. They played with the name. They did the spoofing of it. This is straight up, oh no, Batgirl, everybody's new favorite hero, is going to be on Ed Sullivan tonight.
Ed Sullivan.
Yeah,
and I think it's great.
Yeah,
but it's also, again, and it is very much of its time in that regard. The thing that's interesting to me is that, like, for example, going back to when you talk about the villains and the henchmen and all that kind of stuff, it's like the henchmen make Batgirl look good, but they still get away because they're not getting thrown into jail. I just want to point that out. But the idea that Batgirl's going to be on Ed Sullivan and Robin's just feeling left out, and then the idea of Robin being jealous and worried that he's somehow on the outs was something they played with in the comic books too. I mean, they made Robin out to be a very insecure kid, which is just not fair to Robin. But the idea that Batgirl's going to be on Ed Sullivan, I love that.
So Dick gets a call from Commissioner Gordon about the trio scene leaving the broadcast studio, with Riddler leaving behind a clue, what's worth two in the hand. So he decides he's going to take them all on, and he heads out as Robin in the Batmobile, thinking to himself that they're headed over to the Hand Hotel, and the bird is Penguin.
Right.
Yeah. And that's fair.
And I guess what was the driving age in 1968/1969? I guess, I mean, it's different in every state, but assuming Gotham is New York. So right. I guess, is Robin 16 and a half? Is he 17? Because that's never made entirely clear. But, Robin gets to drive the Bat. I mean, he's driven the Batmobile throughout this series, so that's not an issue. Of course, he got his driver's license in the third season of Batman 66. But I'm always struck by that. I'm like, exactly how old is Robin supposed to be? But Robin completely falls into the trap and decides that he's going to take them on his own because he's feeling so left out.
Yep. And it is a trap because as he's driving down the road, he comes to a halt because a giant hand appears in the road with a stop sign on it.
It's so great. The idea that there's this gigantic hand that pops out and has a stop sign on it. That's just great.
It is.
I love it. It's got shades of Batman 66. It's got shades of Bill Finger and the oversized props. it's part of its own thing, the kind of thing that you would see on this cartoon. But this idea of it, instead of it just being a stop sign, it's this gigantic hand. And then, of course, as Robin gets out to check it out, the hand cover, the fingers curl over him, and they drop down a cage.
Right.
And Robin is literally a bird in hand. And it's a great sight gag. It's again the kind of thing that they could do really easily with animation, better than they could in any other medium, and it just works. It's got pizzazz. It's funny. I love it.
What? We're two in the bush. A bird in the hand is right. And the bird in our hands is a robin.
The villain's trap has been sprung. Robin is trapped, and the duo is split. What more can happen? Don't miss the thrilling second half of It Takes Two to Make a Team, coming up next.
Everything's Archie.
You get free Archie toys and Post cereal.
In Alphabet, you get a free Archie car, just like the Jalopy Archie drives. Free. And on the Alphabet's box, Eddie's here for Archie and Jughead and Archie's Garage. Fill up your car with Archies and give them a ride. Get your free Archie car in Post Alphabets, where everything's Archie.
A Play-Doh man, a cat, a dog, a funny crocodile, a hobby horse, a yellow frog, a monkey with a smile, a cuckoo bird, an apple tree, a willy walrus, a moo cow, a bumblebee, a Play-Doh-potamus, an elephant, a ball, a house, a polka dot giraffe, an aeroplane, a ship, a mouse, a face to make you laugh. Play-Doh, Play-Doh, you can make it with Play-Doh. Every Play-Doh 4-pack has 4 blendable colors. Play-Doh, from the Play-Doh people.
Falling for the foul, fiendish plot of 3 feckless felons, Robin believes he's being surpassed as Batman's #1 crime-fighting partner by Batgirl. Then the unhappy boy wonder foolishly sets out to capture the villains alone, but instead, he is trapped.
When part 2 opens, though, and again, I say it's got every little touch that we like here. Here's Robin now back at their lair, and they've got him on this small zigzag platform surrounded by crocodiles in the water.
Yeah, this is sadistic.
Yeah,
they're enjoying this. This is Robin is at his power. And of course it's shades of the. And I have no idea whether this is something they considered or whether it was just something they invented out of their own minds. But this is shades of the Batman 66 episode with King Tut,
right?
With Robin on the sliding platform and the crocodiles below. But here they make it really, really bad because then they start to try to blind him with strobe lights. So he's on this like little, really thin zigzag platform. You've got these hungry alligators, and Robin is just completely overwhelmed and basically starts crying out for Batman. He's like, "Batman, please save me." And now here's the thing. This is, to me, what was great about Filmation that you didn't see. You didn't see it in Super Friends. You didn't have the sense of humor, at least that we haven't seen yet, is that when he calls for Batman, he reaches for his homing device and in his belt, and he says, "Batman, tune in, and I won't drop out again," which is a reference, of course, to Timothy Leary's, tune in, drop out, the whole. And I thought that again, they were throwing these adult pop culture references in on this show, which they did in a very sly way, as we've established over these episodes, with references to, like, one of the best examples that I could think of was, the whole politics, the whole election episode was just rife with political references. The episode where, Commissioner Gordon is worried about losing his pension. And, there's all sorts of things that they throw in for adults and they weren't even writing for adults. There was no assumption at the time that adults were watching these cartoons, unlike later with Batman the Animated Series, where they were making them for all ages and they wanted adults to appreciate them as much as kids would. They didn't have any kind of, they were not approaching these cartoons that way back in 1968 and 1969. So the writers are doing this for themselves.
Oh yeah,
they're writing, they're making jokes for themselves, and I really appreciate that, because now watching that as a guy who's in his 50s and looking back, it's a gag that I really appreciate, and I laughed out loud when I heard it. My wife was in the room when she watched it too, and she started smiling when she saw that too.
I also liked, and again, I said this thing's got a little of something for everybody. There's even, and I'm not sure if I'm right about this, but I think I am. This is the first time we see Barbara's apartment.
Yeah, it looks good too, doesn't it?
Yeah,
well pointed, and again, in the same way they did on the '66 show, you see it here. It's like, now hold on a second. We know that the Gordons don't come from money. Okay. We know that you can't make that much as a librarian.
Yeah.
And even if he's civil servant, I'm not sure how much money Commissioner Gordon made because he was a civil servant. I mean, he was a high-priced civil servant. Certainly one of the most, probably one of the best paid civil servants in Gotham City.
Right.
But that doesn't make him wealthy. And I look at her apartment, and I'm like, man, she's got a nice apartment. Even in animation, that's a really nice apartment. It's very colorful. But I also thought it was interesting that they didn't show us Batgirl as Barbara Gordon. They only showed her in silhouette.
Yes.
And I thought that was a very... I was like, were they trying to imply Yvonne Craig somehow? I thought that was interesting that they did that, because we've already seen Batgirl with her hair up in a bob with red hair on this series. But they decided that they wanted to play with the silhouette. And I thought it would look really cool. I like the way they did it. And they even, again, reestablished the fact that she's Commissioner Gordon's daughter, and she says something like, well, my father doesn't know, which kind of comes off as sort of a non sequitur. But it really worked in the scene, because you do see her apartment in the background. And while it's not exact, it did seem to recall the same apartment that she did have on the live-action series.
Right. Right. I'm just realizing now, we did see the apartment once before, but not the whole apartment. All we saw was the closet. There was like a Batgirl closet that opens and she goes into and comes out a moment later. But there's no details, nothing. This now we're seeing the details of the apartment.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very colorful. It's really cool.
Absolutely. So the two of them are out. She's on her Batgirl cycle. He's in the Batcopter, and they both get Robin's signal from his homing device.
Right.
So they come to the rescue, and in fact, just as Robin, and I don't know where this came from, there's a wooden plank that suddenly was there that wasn't there before in all the other scenes.
Of course.
But he tries to make his way across. It comes loose, and it's this weird physics thing, I don't know, of gravity or lack of, where he's hanging off it, but it hasn't fallen into the water yet. And
it's awkward.
Yeah, it's awkward. It is, but Batman swings in at the last moment as the plank falls into the water, catches Robin, and, ta-da, rescued.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
There's nobody here but us crocodiles.
Who? Oh, Robin. Thank goodness you're all right.
Thanks to Batman.
You were very foolish, chum. Do you realize you fell for a villainous plot to break us up?
I do now, Batman. I'm sorry.
Together again?
You bet.
Come on, let's go find that terrible trio.
Batman at the same time can't resist chastising him.
Of course not.
That's... Yeah, and you used to see that a lot more in the Filmation Superman cartoons. Whenever Jimmy would get into trouble, Superman, he'd actually get kind of pissed. He's like, there's this one episode, for example, where Jimmy turns to Superman and says, gee, Superman, how could I ever repay you? And Superman says, by never failing to heed a warning. He's like, it's like Superman's like, he's got no patience for Jimmy. He's like, look, I told you this was going to be a problem, and I told you not to do it, and you did it anyway. And so there's a little bit of that with Batman and Robin here, where Batman is like, hey, come on here, which is okay. I mean, I don't mind Batman being annoyed, because you'd think that after all the times that they've been together, that Robin would have a little bit more security about their relationship.
Right.
But again, he's a teenager, and teenagers are insecure about things, so it's kind of infitting that Robin would feel this way. But yeah, it's a nice bit that the trio are back together and as a trio, and it's teamwork, and now they're going to get the villains.
They got to go get the villains who've gone to the Peruvian embassy to steal the Incan map. They arrive there, and I noticed it was interesting because Batman doesn't do anything in the way of warning them that, don't forget, we're stepping into another country technically.
Oh, right. Yeah, right. Good point. That's true. Good point.
Which is shades of the 66 third season episode with Catwoman.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But Batman does surprise them, and for a brief moment, it looks like the trio are going to be caught. But the ambassador to the embassy sort of screws things up, and they're able to get away.
Yeah, and man, whenever they would show someone from another country, no matter what country it was, it is always stereotype.
Yes,
I mean it doesn't matter where. Down to whatever kind of accent they give them, the way they're drawn and the way they behave. It every time it makes me cringe.
Yes,
and the same thing happens here. It's like yeah.
Yeah, it's painful. It's brief, exactly. But it's painful.
It's brief, but it's painful. It's like,
right.
Yeah.
But that's when Batman decides to use their idea against them and try and work them into breaking themselves up.
Right, which is again goes to the high concept nature of these cartoons, because in both cases, the idea of the villain solution to defeating Batman, Robin, and Batgirl isn't, their solution is to try to break them up. It isn't just to kill them. It isn't just to shoot them when they have the chance. It isn't even, to club them into submission. It's always, well, we've got to come up with a way to make them less effective. So let's go through this really elaborate ruse that requires a lot of planning and a lot of manpower and a lot of hopes that it'll be successful. And of course, it's successful to a degree, but then it starts to fail. And the same thing. And so Batman and Robin, and Batgirl, their approach is, hey, let's do the same thing to them, as opposed to just go swing in and beat the snot out of them. it's just simply let's go mess with their heads. Let's go. This is the kind of goes to that whole idea of. This is the way the way you would play Batman and Robin in the backyard.
Right.
This isn't Gotham City logic. This is kid logic. So the idea that let's do to them what they try to do to us, and let's just flip the script here is endearingly immature, I guess is the way I could put it.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, I always love that because they never think for a moment, the villains, that they're trying to play on ideas and stuff that morally good people in the end will stand up to and realize is wrong. But they themselves are so easily falling into the trap as Batman, Robin, and Batgirl appear on TV and sort of argue amongst themselves over which of the villains will sell out the other two.
Hello, Riddler. The dynamic dodos are on television right now, if you care to look.
I feel sorry for the Penguin because the other two will no doubt cut the evil bird out of the treasure.
Is that so?
Oh, no. I think Penguin is too smart. The Riddler and Joker aren't much on brains.
Nonsense. I'll bet the Riddler has a plan right now to cut out the Joker.
Well? Don't move. Just hand over the other parts of the map.
Get lost, Birdbrain. When you came through that door, you were sprayed with knockout gas.
But you know that this is coming because this to me has always been the lie underwriting, say, the Legion of Doom.
Right.
And you would see that in these episodes too, is that villains you can't have a legitimate villain team up because inevitably it will crack because self-interest will override any other mutual interest. And it's different than organized crime where there's a hierarchy. Where it's actually an enterprise and there are rules and it may be, organized crime may be filled with sociopaths, but there is at least there's a structure. Here, when you just have these villains teaming up with each other, there's no way that they're going to get along. But it's an idea that never works because inevitably it has to crumble under its own weight.
Right. And it does.
Yes.
Because they set on each other and basically through knockout gas, Penguin and Riddler are taken down and only Joker remains standing. So he takes the map and makes his way to the dock where he tries to take a boat to take him to Peru, which I thought was also funny.
Yes.
But the boat's captain or pilot is Batman in disguise.
Yes.
So...
Which I love that too, because you see him from behind and you see he's got his cowl on, but he's also got the captain's hat on.
Yes.
And he has to turn away and turns off the captain's hat. It's like, surprise. It's great. Yeah.
And what happens is it just quickly leads to a chase as Joker runs off and he grabs another smaller boat, tries to get away, but Robin's following on the whirly bat, which I liked.
I love the whirly bat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. And ultimately, he jumps overboard from his boat for whatever reason, tries to swim, makes it to the dock, and there's Batgirl lying on her belly waiting for him.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
It's so weird. I was like, what is that? But it is kind of funny. But I was like, why did they have her do that? Why isn't she standing there? But I guess the idea that they wanted to have them face to face. But yeah, it's funny how they just corner him in the end. It's fun.
Right. There was that little part of me that felt it would have been nice if Robin could have gotten some redemption as being the one to get the kill in the end and capture Joker. But the idea is they're a team, and look at them. It starts to Batman, goes to Robin, leads to Batgirl. We got him.
Right, exactly. And what I like, the one thing I would say is that, and you would see this sort of also on Batman 66, is I think the first part of the two-part is actually stronger. That the setup is better than the payoff.
Yes.
But you still have these moments that are a lot of fun. And the great payoff in the end is that the three of them work together to bring down the villains because, teamwork is the most important thing.
Right. Exactly.
Lesson for you kids.
Exactly. Lesson for you kids. Teamwork works. Or teamwork makes the dream work.
Nice. Spoken like a true teacher.
There you go.
Congratulations, dynamic duo. And of course, you too, Batgirl. You've outdone yourselves this time.
Teamwork, Commissioner. That's what does it.
You can't beat it.
But overall, definitely a great way to end the two-parters. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
Now, we come to the one-parter here, and the story's called Opera Buffa or Buff. I'm guessing Buffa. It's supposed to be.
Buffa.
Is it Buffa?
It's Buffa, isn't it? I think it's Buffa.
Because I thought it was a play on Opera Buff.
No, it's Italian. So I'm fairly certain. Someone should correct me, but I'm fairly certain it's Opera Buffa.
Okay. Now, what's interesting is that if you, because I watch these on iTunes, and iTunes actually gives the title, although it is not shown in the episode itself, as Opera Buffa Joker style.
Yeah, or mine says Opera Buff Joker style because I think it's weird. But yeah, I thought that's strange also that they do that, but. Yeah, I noticed that also.
Right. Written by Bob Haney.
There you go.
Yep.
Zany Bob Haney.
Zany Bob Haney, yeah.
A few miles outside Gotham City, on the edge of a chasm across a sheer rock cliff, a dedication ceremony is about to begin.
As mayor of Gotham, I am proud to dedicate these great new cliff sculptures of the dynamic duo.
Raise the tarpaulin. Good grief! Look at that other face. It's the Joker.
Look up there.
Face it, dynamic duo. I think I deserve immortalizing in stone, too.
To the Batcopter, come on.
Yeah, this again is one of these very much of its, like I was saying before about, in the two-parter, this is very much of its time, where it's celebrity Batman. It's not shadowy Avenger of the Night Batman. I mean, there was an old Batman comic from either the early, I think it was in the 50s, maybe the early 60s, where there was a statue of Batman in Gotham Harbor that was like the Statue of Liberty, but it was Batman with a big torch, and that used to stand guard in front of Gotham City. So this is like that. I mean, the idea that there's basically a Mount Rushmore to Batman and Robin outside of Gotham City just kind of shows you the level of celebrity and how much he's this civic icon in Gotham, which is a completely different approach to what we see now, and certainly what was the completely different approach when Batman was originally conceived back in 1939. But it is really fun to see this because it's very much what the comic books were like, particularly in the 50s and early 60s. It also has elements of the Batman 66, but in Batman 66 they wouldn't have been able to pull this off without it being really cheesy with the special effects. Here you actually can draw, and here's what I loved about the image, or about this bit, which is the image itself, the matte painting of Batman and Robin and the Joker is fantastic.
It is.
Particularly the detail on Batman itself. I mean, again, like I mentioned before about the two-parter, how they had the shot of the billboard with Batman and Batgirl. It's the same thing here. Whoever drew or painted this image was pretty much going by the stock image of Batman specifically and how he looked in the comic books at the time. The way his cowl is drawn, the way the Bat logo is drawn on his chest, the folds of his cape on his shoulders, really looks like that Carmine Infantino design that was the house style of Batman of the day. And it shows that, and I always like to emphasize, it shows the talent behind the show and the intent behind the show that you didn't always see in the execution of the animation itself.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And Joker's on top of Batman's head, taunting them, so they rush to the Batcopter to fly up there, but Joker has apparently disappeared, so they jump down. And I thought this was interesting because I was like thinking, you saw he was on on Batman's head, but instead they jump onto the Joker's head and immediately get themselves trapped in a rubbery substance that starts to drag them down like quicksand.
This is such a great trap.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of the gigantic birthday cake episode with the Riddler. I think it was the John Astin Riddler, right?
Yes.
Where it's the same kind of thing, where they're sucked down and they're getting pulled in, and it's also shades of the Freezy Frosty's Mr. Freeze episode also. So it has those that colorful fun. It also has that Bill Finger, Dick Sprang, oversized prop idea. So this is that version of Batman at its best. You've got this larger-than-life death trap. You've got the larger-than-life circumstance. It's predictable and yet inventive at the same time, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense. And I know this is going to sound a little weird too, but I did like the fact because, again, it's animation, and so we don't have to worry about special effects or how this affects costuming. We see them actually stuck in it and trying to pull themselves out. So you see the way it's drawn, that they're being dragged down into it. Whereas with the Frosty Freeze, it's this colored, maybe lit up foam in front of them. Or with the cake, it's just the level. We don't see the actual sand they're in. We just see them being lowered. This is the physical actually happening, so it added a little layer of, wow, that's creepy to this.
It also plays off of that, there's that gag. And I don't know who was the comedian who first said it. But, that joke that we all grew up thinking that quicksand was going to be a lot bigger problem in our lives than it actually was.
Yeah.
Because how many TV shows and cartoons used that idea that somehow our characters would be caught in quicksand?
Right.
And then while this isn't quicksand, it might as well be.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So as they are sinking and Robin is panicking and all, Joker appears again and he taunts the two, wishing them well, as he goes off saying he's going to commit one of the greatest crimes of his career, where the Matador will get the girl.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, because it's really necessary for him to just leave oblique clues.
Yes.
That's important. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to tell you, and I'm going to give you a really vague clue about it because that's just part of the game.
Right, exactly.
That's what this was. It was because it's all fun and games. It's just everything is for theatricality, and that's what I love about it. It just is what it is, and it doesn't need to be explained or it's just fun. It's just because it's fun.
Yes. Yep. Now, the two managed to get out of the trap, though, by having the Batcopter lower down and drop the Bat Ladder. And I'm going to call it the Bat Ladder. They didn't say it, but right out of the 1966 movie, it's the Bat Ladder. And
it's the Bat Ladder,
it pulls them out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Now, I found this interesting that, and again, this is the shortcut of the writing and such, Joker later on is heading to the opera house and he hears the news that the two are missing. Right. And I'm assuming there was something in the middle where basically Batman said, put that message out there, because this was an award, this was a ceremony. I'm assuming it was covered by the press. They must have seen Batman freed.
I had the same reaction you did, because I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, missing? Well, I don't get it. And it was just an off-screen thing that you just kind of have to take that leap. That because it was it's a short episode. That the assumption is that you have to think that they decided to put out there the fake information to catch the Joker off guard.
Right.
Because there's no logical follow-through or explanation as to what that is. Because, again, like you said, first off, when they call the Batcopter, it's like Batman forgot the Batcopter was there. Because as the viewer, as a kid, you probably forgot the Batcopter is there. So the way Batman says it is like, wait, don't forget, we've got the Batcopter. Oh, yeah, we've got the Batcopter. So the Batcopter pulls them out. But since it was done in front of the public, that you would have to assume that they decided to plant the fake story.
Right. Exactly. Now, I said at the top of the show, this has got a little bit of everything. And yes, indeed, we get to see Bruce and Dick one more time back at the mansion.
At stately Wayne Manor, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson try to puzzle out the Joker's clue.
Where the Matador gets the girl. It doesn't make sense.
It must mean something, Dick.
Excuse me, Mr. Wayne, but may I have tomorrow night off to attend the opera? They're playing Carmen, you know.
Carmen. That's it. The Matador gets the girl in Carmen. The Joker's going to pull a caper at the opera.
And I think I know what it is. In today's Gotham Times, look, the Tetrazzini Tiara, worth 2 million smackers.
Yes, sir. And the soprano's going to wear it tomorrow night at the performance.
The paper says it's under guard backstage at the Gotham City Opera House.
Come on, Dick. We're going to see Commissioner Gordon as the Caped Crusaders.
Your plan's risky, Batman, but it may teach the Joker a lesson he'll never forget. Okay, go to it.
Thanks. Now, Robin, we've got to make up for our own grand opera, The Revenge of the Caped Crusaders.
I liked also, in addition to Alfred coming out and triggering it, then Dick comes along and says, and I was reading the paper that the Soprano's going to wear the Tetrazzini tiara, which is so 66 Batman.
Oh, it really is. And I mean, the other thing that's noteworthy is that like you were mentioning, referencing Dick Grayson in the last episode. I like the fact that Bruce and Dick always wear the same clothes.
Yes.
And I'm not sure, and I understand that with animation it's a matter of keeping characters on model.
Right.
But I always understood that it was okay to have them on model in their outfits, in their costumes. But I never really understood why it was important that Batman and Robin and Bruce and Dick, why Bruce and Dick always had to wear the same colored suits.
Right.
And I would hope that maybe one of your listeners would be able to put that in the notes. And that's something I've never really quite understood, because you would see that on Batman the Animated Series too, that Bruce Wayne would frequently wear those earth tone, suits that he would wear, those tan suits. And I'm thinking, why is it that they always, as secret identities, always had to wear the same outfits that they wear as well? And I just don't have an answer to that. But I was always reminded when I saw the scene, that Bruce and Dick are always wearing the same clothes.
Well, it's like I said, Dick riding a bicycle in the suit.
Right, that's what I'm referencing. It's like he's wearing a suit, but it's that same beige suit. Like Batman wears like the dark brown, and Robin wears kind of a lighter brown. Right. And I've never understood why it is that I always think it's funny that Dick is always wearing a suit anyway at Wayne Manor, which at least on the 66 show, they always, he usually was wearing like a velour pullover.
Right.
With an open collar shirt. He was just like a preppy kid. As opposed, but he didn't usually wear a suit while just hanging around Wayne Manor. But they made that point on Filmation. I just never understood why the suits always had to be the same color. But I'm sure there's an animation reason that I'm missing because I'm just not enough of an expert.
Well, at the Opera House, Joker is there with his men, and he's mapping out, I guess, the last details of his plan, and they're startled by what they think they see as ghosts, being Batman and Robin. First, they see just their heads projected onto one of the box seating areas there that's covered by a curtain, and then the men actually see Batman and Robin, and they're glowing. But quickly, the goons realize they must be real because they're caught by the two of them. I liked it. I liked the whole glowing. I liked the animation of it. It was really good.
Yeah, and when we see Batman and Robin's heads on the curtains, I thought to myself, are they supposed to be just sticking their heads out of the curtains? I couldn't figure out what are they doing there? But then when you see them behind, later in the hallway, and you see them completely glowing, it just looks really, really cool. And of course, the whole thing is way too elaborate. It's unnecessary for them to this whole notion that they fake their death and all of that is really unnecessary for the plot. But I mean, this is classic Bob Haney. It's a cool thing to do, so do it, but it doesn't necessarily make much sense.
Right, exactly. And of course, it freaks Joker out seeing them like that. Yeah. And I love the bit where he cuts their bat ropes as they're swinging towards him. How he manages to do that, I don't know. But, you know, from the looks of it, it doesn't seem to make sense. But okay,
Yeah.
So they fall, and thanks through the old mirror trick, it looks like they disappear midair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, again, they don't really show that effectively with the animation.
No.
But it's okay. It's like, all right, I get it.
Yeah, exactly. Joker's able to grab the tiara and races off in his Joker car.
There he goes!
To the Batmobile! Hurry!
So we get...
Love the Joker car.
Yep, there you go. One last look at the Joker car.
I have the tiara, but I must make sure if the dynamic duo are really dead or alive.
Retouch your makeup, Robin. We're going to need it for the grand finale.
I got to make sure. So he heads back to the statue and basically starts poking around the top of his statue head looking to see if they're gone. And then when he sees the two of them up above him, he freaks out and falls into his own trap.
Yeah. What I love here is the idea, because it's really sick when you think about it, that the Joker goes back to find their bodies because he assumes that their dead bodies are of all places it must be a Joker fever dream, that of all places to find Batman and Robin's corpses is inside Joker's head.
Yes.
It is. There's something really, I don't know if it's Freudian or whatever it is, but it's actually kind of, it's grotesque.
Yeah.
When you think about it, because it's, and again, this is what I was talking about earlier about, you know, when we've discussed because we're doing the Super Friends podcast, the difference between Filmation and Super Friends is that he's just very openly talking about their dead bodies.
Right.
You know, he's just very much, you know, I got to find their dead bodies to prove that they're dead. And so he thinks that they are stuck inside his head, which is creepy and gross and hysterical at the same time. And of course, as he would, he gets caught in his own trap.
Right. Yeah. And so he needs to be saved.
Right.
And I liked, there was a little bit of a darkness there too, as Robin is kind of like, we got to save him, don't we? You know, almost.
Yeah. Yeah, almost grudgingly.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And in typical Batman Filmation, end of the series, it's perfect. We get a wah-wah moment.
Bravo, Caped Crusaders. Obviously, your scheme to play Phantoms paid off. Ha! But at least I ruined your precious monuments, dynamic duo.
Sorry to disappoint you, Joker, but your physiognomy has been blasted off the cliffs.
Yes, and for vandalizing public property, we'll add a few months to your sentence. In you go. Oh, no. Take them away, please.
We get a great bat taunt.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, they're just twisting the knife. It's like, here's, you know, they fixed the statues, you know, they blasted away the Joker's part of it. Now Batman and Robin look great. And now, Joker, you're going to have to look at it. You're going to have to look at it, and you're going to have to think about what you did wrong.
Right. Don't they ever think that when they do things like that, they just make matters worse?
Yeah, right. I know. But that's just, so much like the Superman always had his wink at the camera at the end. Batman and Robin got their bat taunts in.
Right.
Yeah, we caught you. I love it.
But, you know, if it's going to end, and obviously it is, it ends on a fun note. I won't say a high note, but I will say a fun note.
Yeah, I mean, overall it's a high note because I think both of these episodes are really entertaining.
They are.
There's so much fun. So much of the stuff that we love about the Filmation cartoons come out in both of these. And it's just, you know, they're not flabby. One of the things that we would complain about some of the early episodes is they were a little flabby. They felt a little flat. There was something missing. They were fun, but there was something off. These are, you know, they're kitschy and warm and entertaining and amusing and colorful, and it's exactly what you want these cartoons to be.
Right. Now, maybe we will come back for one more overall, but I quickly I think we should, but I quickly want to ask you two questions here.
Sure.
Considering how we were tying this in with 66 in so many ways, I know you have your favorite 66 Bat villain, both original and from the comics and such.
Right.
So let me ask you here, best Filmation villain from the comics and then of their originals.
Oh, well, in terms of the way that they were translated, it's a tie between the Joker and the Joker and the Riddler.
Okay.
The Penguin is okay. He's fine. Catwoman, we've gone over at great lengths about the fact that primarily because of the voice. They made out Catwoman to be the smartest of the four villains here, the four big villains here. But I think the Joker and the Riddler, and I was always taken by the Riddler, and the Riddler episodes are some of my favorite in this entire series. So I guess those two. But as far as what they created for the show, I mean, it's not even close. It's Simon the Pie Man.
There you go.
I mean, it's not even close. I mean, that's just. I mean, and I thought it was hysterical on and you referenced it also the recent thing we did at 13th Dimension for Batman's 80th anniversary was the top 13 Batman episode, the top 13 Batman countdown, which was the top 13 stories. Batman stories in any medium. It was whether it was comics, animation, movies, TV, whatever it was. And I liked how one of your picks was the Simon the Pie Man episodes in your personal list of top 13 Batman episodes or Batman stories of all time. So I appreciated that. I thought I said, there's John being John. Got to get the Simon the Pie Man.
Simon the Pie Man was incredible. I wish to God. Now I forget. Who was it that I thought I saw? They said they actually managed to work him into something else.
Well, he was worked into Batman Brave and the Bold.
There you go.
Yeah. They worked him into that as a cameo scene. But I don't even know if it was necessarily a speaking part. And as you know, I thought that the perfect Simon the Pie Man would have been Edward G. Robinson.
Yes.
Although someone else pointed out, a reader pointed out that Jonathan Winters would have made a really good Simon the Pie Man also, especially because he liked to dress up in drag. And I think that that's true, too. That Jonathan Winters would have made a great Simon the Pie Man on the TV show.
Right. Now, I agree with everything you said. I would throw in just a little mention of the Judge just because that had to be
creepy.
Exactly. It was the creepiest, darkest story. I don't know necessarily about the villain himself if he had legs, but that was just a damn creepy story.
It was a creepy story. The only thing I said about the Judge is that I think that he was a little bit too derivative of Two-Face.
Right.
Even though he didn't have that Jekyll Hyde gimmick or the number 2 gimmick, the idea of jurisprudence. And because that's often that you would see that because Harvey Dent was a district attorney, that sometimes his plots or his capers would have a judicial theme behind them. So I kind of thought that it was a little bit derivative of that. But I don't even think that that's what the writers or the producers were going for when they were doing that episode. I don't think they were thinking, well, let's get a stand-in for Two-Face. I think they just thought of the Judge and wrote the story accordingly.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I agree. So, all right, so let's do that then. Let's, for some point soon, you and I should sit down and just do an overview of the series and such. But in the meantime, things are going to continue happening here on Batcave, plus things are happening over at 13thdimension.com. What's been going on over there?
Well, as I like to say, that if your listeners like these podcasts, then they're going to like what they see at the website. We do a lot of stuff that's retro, but we do a lot of stuff that's modern as well, and it's comic books, TV, movies, you name it. So, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, check out the site because chances are that you will find something that you will enjoy.
And that is at 13th Dimension, 13thdimension.com.
Yep. And don't forget also our recently launched Super Friends podcast, the world's greatest Super Friends podcast, which John and I are doing as well.
Yes. We are taking every single episode of, and it was funny because Dan and I just also in this recording block did an episode of the podcast, and I've been watching them through DC streaming, which I wish they would put the Filmation Batman on there.
I couldn't believe that when Aquaman came out, the movie came out, we're recording this in May of 2019, so it's been 5 months or whatever it's been since Aquaman came out. because that was December, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
So it's been a while now that they didn't put the Aquaman cartoons on the app.
Right.
And that was such a natural that I can only think that there are contracts involved that because they're available elsewhere, that right now they can't put them on the app. I don't know how it works, but we know that the app, while it has a ton of great stuff, is not comprehensive. So that there has to be a reason. I can't imagine, since some of the Filmation stuff is on there. I think is the Filmation 77 stuff on?
This Filmation 77 is on there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so they definitely are aware of this stuff. And as I've written at 13th Dimension pointing out, that the lost Superboy episodes of Filmation, which had never been made available, I mean, they were made available, a couple of them, on the old Superpowers VHS cassettes back in the 80s. But the Superboy episodes were not made available on disc and were not made available on iTunes, but you can get them on the DC Universe app. So they know what they have, so there obviously is a reason that they're not doing it. And I wonder if it's because it's some iTunes things or some iTunes thing. I can only speculate.
I don't know. I love the service though, but you're right. There's just so much more that they could get into to cover and have as a complete resource for everything DC related. But I do like the fact all 9 seasons of the Super Friends are on there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So, make sure you check that out. We do have an iTunes feed for it, as well as Stitcher and Google Play and all those other good things. In terms of the coverage, there's also a Facebook page, so you can find it there. I'll put links for that in the show notes. In addition, we're continuing here, Robert Long and I, taking a look at every Batman 66 inspired god-awful movie that was ever made.
Great.
We recently did a review, and that should be coming along the pipe soon, Ratfink a Boo Boo, which was a movie that was made that was supposed to be just a straight cop thriller, like crime procedural drama, and about halfway through the movie, the producer was like, that Batman's really cool. So suddenly he's not a detective, but our main character decides to become a crime fighter halfway into the movie.
I love it. I love it.
It's crazy.
The 60s, man. The 60s.
Yeah.
It's just great. Yeah.
We also have our reviews of Electra Woman and Dinah Girl, which was the 70s Batman and Robin, no matter how you slice it, with Kevin Eldridge of the Flopcast. And very soon we'll be starting up our look at Monster Squad, the 70s TV show that Stanley Ralph Ross had a big hand in working on and managed to also work in a number of the jokes that the producers wouldn't let him do on Batman 66.
Right.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
And, of course, as Dan mentioned, Batman 77 Filmation. I'll be doing that. So that is going to do it then for this episode of the Batcave Podcast. Dan, once again, thank you so much for this.
John, this has been so much fun. To be able to go through these and really look at them, and to get to use this also as an opportunity to write about a lot of this stuff.
Yes.
The other thing that's worth noting at 13th Dimension is that a lot of times when we've done these episodes, I've done a special column that really kind of dives into one particular aspect of the cartoon that we've been talking about. So when you do go to 13th Dimension, do in the search window, look up Filmation Batman, and you'll probably find about 25 different stories that look even beyond what John and I have talked about. We'll really look into, I've done like a whole takeout on Catwoman herself and how she fits in the larger scheme of things in terms of, Batman of the 60s and 70s, and the same thing I did one with the Riddler. I've done it with Mr. Freeze, but also like episodes that really kind of lend themselves to an even deeper dive than what John and I have done here. So I highly recommend that you go, and plus I've got episode guides and what have you. So by all means, do check that out at 13th Dimension, because there's a lot of good stuff there that I think you guys will enjoy.
Absolutely. Dan will be back, folks, as we wrap up the Filmation series here. Plus, there's a whole lot of stuff to cover in the post-Batman 66 universe that I know Dan will be along for. Plus, make sure you're checking us out on the World's Greatest Super Friends podcast. So, until next time, once again, Dan, everyone, thank you for listening. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening, chums. I don't have a bat phone, but you can contact the Batcave Podcast through its Facebook page, Twitter, email at thebatcavepodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to the podcast via Libsyn.com. That's LIBSYN.com. Or through iTunes. The Batcave Podcast is part of a series of pop culture podcasts from the Chronic Rift Network. Find them at chronicrift.com. So until next time, citizens, same bat time, same Batcave Podcast.